Okay, this is the final video in the frames series. And so in this one, we're going to take a look at the postmodern frames. So let me just pull that up. Bam, a banana taped to a wall. I'm not sure if you've seen this artwork before. Absolutely encourage you, if you've got some spare time and you just got nothing better to do some Googling on this work and the controversy it created, and to look up conceptual art in general. It's always really interesting to find out more information about conceptual art. Okay, this one is a little bit different because we're going to be kind of delving into some concepts surrounding postmodernism as a sort of a critical theory lens, and postmodernism as a lens doesn't apply to all art. So you can't look at every artwork through the postmodern frame in order to analyze it, but learning when this frame applies is obviously pretty important. So the postmodern frame is used to interpret artworks that challenge mainstream and traditional ideas about the art world. So really, postmodernism has only really kind of come about in the last 100 years or so, probably from about the middle of the 20th century onwards, and it kind of sprung up as a response to modernism, or a reaction against modernism, I should say, and kind of the ideas and the beliefs and values that were brought about as a result of the modernist movement. And one of the things with sort of postmodernism was this kind of new skepticism and criticism of the art world. So when we look at art through the postmodern frame, the meaning of art is understood in relation to the complex changing nature of contemporary life. So we're looking at it in terms of how, I guess, the whole world changes in the present from the technologies and the attitudes and the values of the past. So artists may use new technologies and experimental art making practices, and I'll come back to that in a second, and they communicate meaning through techniques like appropriation, intertextuality, humour, parody, satire, and irony. So going back to new technologies and experimental art making, we're kind of in a moment right now where AI has sort of entered the ring. And as a result of that, we're seeing a massive insurgence of artists, both criticizing AI technology and other artists using AI technology. And there's a huge discourse in the arts community about whether or not AI art is even art. And I'm not going to attempt to answer that. That's for you to make up your mind about. But that's a really good example of postmodernism in action. New artists taking new technologies, they're experimenting with new ways of making art and challenging traditional ideas about the art world. And I got to tell you, in online communities, people hate AI art. So it's definitely an interesting thing to find out about. So the first task I want you to do before we go any further is there's a few words that some you may be familiar with and some you may not be familiar with, but these are words that apply specifically to postmodernism. So each one of the following terms is a key arts concept that can be applied to postmodern creation of art and readings of art. So you can use these in your own art making, and you can use them as a tool for making readings of art. So I want you to basically create a glossary list of these. So write down each word and Google the definition. And because these aren't necessarily art words, you may want to include the word art in your search. So you might want to type in, for example, appropriation in art, because if you just type appropriation, you'll probably get cultural appropriation. I would also like you to include an image of an example of an artwork that uses this technique. Make sure to correctly cite the artwork. So artist's name, the title of the artwork, the year created, and the media that is used, because that's just ethical use of images. So the first word is appropriation. So what is appropriation in art? Intertextuality, again, intertextuality in art, because if you just type intertextuality, you'll probably get a lot about literature. Pastiche in art, satire in art, and irony in art. So create a glossary list of those with images, so an illustrated glossary. And even better if you can include a note on why the chosen images that you have demonstrate this technique. So you've got the word, the definition, an example, and why this is an example. Once you've done that, come back. Okay, so let's break down the postmodern frame through the conceptual framework. So if we look at the artist through the postmodern frame, artists are aware of trends, issues, attitudes, values in contemporary art, and they use innovative practices or experimental practices to explore new ideas and techniques that challenge the traditional or mainstream values. So, they really are experimental, sometimes in ways that can be confronting, sometimes in ways that can be disturbing, sometimes in ways that are just quite frankly disgusting. There was one artist, and I can't recall his name, he literally canned his own feces, and he labeled the cans and it said artists bleep, and he put that in a gallery. Now that's rank, but it was absolutely challenging traditional and mainstream values. Interesting what gallery would have chosen to exhibit that. If we look at the artwork through a postmodern frame, so artworks are thought of as visual texts that may feature reconfigurations or responses to previous texts. That is what intertextuality is. So it's a text that references another text. So in this context, it's an artwork that references another artwork, or explores popular culture, or represents innovative applications of new ideas or technologies. So an artwork that offers a critique on modern society could be seen as being postmodern. The audience, through the postmodern frame, audiences are aware of power relationships within the world and the art world, and are also empowered to bring their own challenge, doubt, and skepticism to their interpretation of artworks. So the audience, through a postmodern frame, is actively engaged in the work and actively engaged in understanding how they bring their own meaning to that work, or challenging the meaning inherent in the work. The world, through the postmodern frame, the world is thought of in terms of power relationships that are challenged and exposed. So artists look to other artworks and texts from the world to reference and reinterpret their art making. And that is essentially appropriation. So, drawing on other artworks, and to some extent, it's not the same as plagiarism, but using those artworks to create other artworks, their own artworks. Okay, questions. So for the artist, how has the artist used experimental or innovative practices to explore new ideas? If an artwork doesn't do that, you can't really apply this frame. So that's really important. How has the artist challenged mainstream or traditional ideas? The artwork, how does this artwork break, challenge, or reinterpret art-making rules, traditions, or conventions? So, for example, canning your own poop, definitely challenging art-making conventions. It's challenging the notion of what can be media, like to create art with, and absolutely challenging attitudes and values of audiences because, gross. Same with the banana on the wall. Sticking a banana on a wall with gaffer tape, it really challenges the concept of the creator and the concept of art making itself. Definitely interesting to read up on that artist and why they did that and their sort of concept behind it. Does this artwork use any new or innovative technologies? And how does this impact the work's meaning? So back in the early 20th century, around sort of the 1910s, there was a group of artists and their movement was called Dada. And if you don't know about the Dadaists, I absolutely recommend you look them up. They were probably one of the first groups to be anti-art. And really, they had a massive impact. In the short time they were together, they had a massive impact on the art world in general. And they were probably the first group to be postmodernist in their approach to art, even though postmodernism wasn't yet a term that had been coined. They challenged the status quo. They put ready-made objects in galleries and said, this is art because we say so. So, they really challenged the whole arts establishment, and God was their uproar about it. People were so offended. So definitely worth looking up. And also, how does that impact the work's meaning as well? And with postmodernism, one of the things with meaning is looking at how that meaning changes over time. Looking at the audience, how might audiences be challenged by this work? So not just what response they're going to have, but how is it challenging something that they maybe believe or value? So a really good example is actually the Patricia Piccinini work that you would have looked at from a previous video. And I hope you've made notes about that one. So don't forget to show me. But that one's absolutely challenging audiences. It's challenging audiences to think about, I can't remember the word, but like biosciences or whatever it's called, bioengineering, I think it was. It's challenging audiences to think about their relationship with animals and with livestock. It's challenging us by confronting us in terms of its hyper-realism and just it's kind of gross. Also, do audiences have to interact with the work to understand its meaning? Does the act of participation change their understanding of the work? Now, we're seeing participatory artwork popping up more since about the 1970s. And I personally have a great interest in work that is participatory because I think it kind of, what's the word I'm looking for here? Not decolonizes, that's not quite the right word. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it makes art more accessible when the audience has to actively engage with it. So that's a really interesting thing to look at. But one of the things is, is the interaction essential for the meaning to be created? Looking at the world, have existing or historical artworks been referenced, reinterpreted or appropriated, and how does this create a new meaning? So what that means is, has the artist taken a famous work of art that's easily recognizable and have they essentially copied it but changed it in a way that is now making a comment on something, a social or cultural issue of some sort? A crude example would be every time you see the Mona Lisa reimagined, so the Mona Lisa with Marge Simpson's head, that's not necessarily making a comment. And often when these appropriated artworks are created, it is to make a comment. Actually, a good example was that Dada group that I just spoke about. Marcel Duchamp, who was one of the artists, he painted a copy of the Mona Lisa and he painted a moustache on the Mona Lisa, and the painting's called Look. It could be worthwhile looking that artwork up and have a look at what the title actually stands for, and then think about what is the comment that he's making about something. I'll leave that to you to look up. And the title of it is Look, L-H-O-O-Q, I think. Finally, what power relationships are challenged and exposed in the world and or the artwork? Okay. You'd be familiar with this style of artwork. This is stencil work. This is by Banksy. Surely you know who Banksy is. He's probably the most famous street artist in the world. This one's called Flower Thrower from 2005. It's stencil and spray paint, and it says dimensions variable, probably because the British City Council always tries to actually uninstall the wall so they can preserve his artworks, which is massively funny because it actually goes against everything Banksy himself believes in. You're going to need to locate a copy of this work and either stick it in your visual diary with the correct citation or pop it into a Word document. Okay, so about the work. This is taken from the Art Story. This work, now covered and protected by a Perspex overlay, ha, lol, features a man dressed up in what we associate with traditional riot gear, with a bandana obscuring his face and a cap on back to front. His stance is one of a person about to lob a Molotov cocktail. He's taking aim and is ready to throw his weapon. However, instead of the weapon, he holds a bunch of flowers, which is the only part of the mural to appear in colour. This piece is located on a wall on the side of a garage in Jerusalem, on the main road to Beit Sahur, Bethlehem. By substituting a weapon with a bunch of flowers, Banksy is advocating for peace, and he opted to install this particular message in a high conflict area. The work also carries a message, the message that peace comes with active hard work. In addition, the bouquet may as also. Okay, I didn't proofread this and I didn't write this, so I'm not taking responsibility for this poor writing. The bouquet may also represent a commemoration of lives lost in the long-running Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And so he's using his art to offer commentary and to relay messages of social importance. The art story really needs to proofread their work. Okay, here's your task. So referring to the artwork image and text of Banksy's artwork, then complete the following activities in your visual diary or a Word document. So we're looking here at critical and historical studies. So paste a copy of the artwork image and citation into your diary or document. In Flower Thrower, Banksy creates meaning through the use of ironic juxtaposition, placing images with contrasting meanings together to make a statement. What different meanings do the flowers and the figure throwing them have, and what new meaning is created through this contrast? So obviously I want you to answer those questions. Banksy is a famous street artist, but their real identity is a closely guarded secret. Why do you think Banksy keeps their identity a secret? And you might like to do a bit of research on Banksy and the commentary that exists surrounding Banksy. What makes Flower Thrower an artwork rather than just graffiti? And that's a really good question, in fact. Would the meaning of this work change if it was displayed in an art gallery or museum? And I want to add to that, how does this work being protected by Perspex affect the meaning or affect its value? How does Flower Thrower challenge mainstream or traditional ideas in the artwork, and how does it challenge ideas or values in the real world? So a little bit of research there on Banksy, on street art, and on this particular work. And he's a really good one to look at in terms of social commentary because all of his work is inherently political and comments on social issues. Please bring me a copy or send me a copy of that once you've completed it so that I can take a look. Okay, another task. So this is an art making task, and it's the final task in this series. I want you to choose two images with opposite meanings. So the way to start this is to think about two binary opposites in terms of theme. So you can explore themes like war, peace, love, hate, abundance, scarce, natural, artificial, happy, sad, dangerous, safe, active, passive. So you're thinking about two opposing or binary oppositions, and then you're going to choose two images. For each image, explain how it represents your chosen theme, and then discuss how the combination of these opposing images creates a new meaning. All right, so they can be photos or they can be artworks. It doesn't really matter, but you're just choosing two images that have opposition. So an example could be a war-torn sort of, dead bodies, guns, that kind of image. And the next one could be children playing. So what does each of those images mean, and how does the combination of those two opposing ideas, how does that change or create a different or new meaning? Create an artwork or an illustration. Now, this can be a drawing or a sketch or a painting, whatever you want to do, that combines your two images as a Banksy-inspired stencil-style artwork. Now, I said a second ago it could be a drawing or whatever. So it really depends. If you have the ability to create and actually stencil, that's really cool. So you can have a think about that. Or you could do something like a cutout collage, or you could just draw it if that's all you have access to at home. So you might choose to create your artwork by cutting out shapes of different coloured paper and gluing them, drawing using different pens or markers, creating an actual stencil and applying paint with a roller or sponge, or manipulating a digital image using the Photoshop threshold adjustment or a similar filter. I don't know if you have access to Photoshop or if you have an iPad and Procreate, but basically however you can create the artwork, create the artwork. The image that you create, now this is an extension, so this is not essential, but if you can, the image you create should link to your body of work. So maybe think about the concept of belonging and alienation. That might be a really good one for you. So an image that represents belonging, alienation, how do we combine them? And if that's the way you choose to go, include annotations on how it relates to your broader inquiry work. I would love to see the artwork that you come up with. Its size is up to you. I would suggest that you aim for it to be A4, so to fit inside your visual diary. But yeah, I'd really like to see what you come up with in terms of that. And it'd be really interesting as well to see how that then maybe develops your concept for your artwork and whether it actually changes that concept for your artwork. That's the last one in this series. There will be some other videos in the future. So once you've completed those tasks, please make sure you're sending them through to me for feedback. And of course, you can review these at any time. That's it for me. Signing off, over and out.